25 days after deadline. New York, USA. Chapter 37. They did not go to Cannes for Christmas. Uncle Eddie claimed he was too old to travel, too set in his ways to be persuaded to change. So Kat and her father joined the throng that descended upon the old brownstone. Inside it was stuffy, as it always was in winter, with a fire blazing in every room, and Uncle Eddie's old stove burning in the kitchen. So when Kat stepped out onto the stoop, she didn't mind the chill. "I thought I might find you here, Katerina." For a brief second she panicked, then realized the voice wasn't Tacone's. It was too gentle, too kind, too happy. "Happy holidays, Mr. Stein." "Happy holidays, Katerina," he said, tipping his hat. She gestured toward the door. "Would you like to come inside?" He quickly waved her away. "Oh, no, Katerina, I have found the person I was searching for." He took a step back. "Would you mind accompanying an old man for a short stroll?" It was an easy question to answer, one of the few she'd heard in a very long time. "You've made an enemy, my dear." Kat turned up her collar against the icy wind. "I could have given them back and stolen them later, but—" "Your father's unfortunate incarceration?" he guessed. Kat shrugged. "My way seemed more efficient at the time." The first time she had met Abraham Stein, she had seen him cry. There was something beautiful, Kat thought, about watching him laugh. "I read a nice article about you," she told him. "The Times?" "No, the London Telegraph." He sighed. "There have been so many. Evidently I am something of, what is the phrase, an overnight sensation?" She laughed. "Don't let it go to your head." They strolled together on the quiet street with only the few stray snowflakes that fell as company. "I feel as if I should thank you, Katerina, but that—" He stopped and placed his hands in his pockets. "That is far too small a thing to do." "Are they—" Kat hesitated, her voice breaking. "Home?" "Some," he assured her. "There are a few families, survivors, that my colleagues and I have located. Do you have read their stories?" "Yes." Kat nodded. "But for the others, Katerina, I'm afraid their homes—" He struggled for words. "Are gone." The snow picked up, falling more heavily as he continued. "But the paintings live. People know their stories now. A new generation will hear their tales, and they will hang in the great museums of the world, and not in a prison." He stepped closer. His hands gripped her arms as he kissed her once on each cheek and then whispered, "You have set them free." She looked down at the wet sidewalk. One was missing. She hadn't said a word about the fifth painting, the empty frame, but somehow she knew Abraham Stein would understand. "There were only 4. I tried, but—" "Yes, Katerina," he said, nodding. "I know this painting. I'll find it. I'll get it back, too." There was a growing sense of urgency coursing through her, but Mr. Stein was calm as he spoke. "Did your mother ever mention why she came to me, Katerina? Did you know that your great-great-grandmother was a very fine painter in her own right?" Kat nodded. She did know. Who else could have forged the Mona Lisa that hung in the Louvre? "And did you know that one of her great friends was a young artist named Claude Monet?" There were many rumors among a family of thieves, and this particular tale was one that Kat had never believed, until now. "He painted her once, your great-great-grandmother, and he gave her the canvas as a gift. It was her pride and joy, her most prized possession, until 1936, when a young Nazi officer took it from her wall." "But," Kat stared, "your great-great-grandmother wasn't Jewish?" Abraham Stein guessed, and then he smiled. "The Nazis could be very equal opportunity with their greed, my dear." "So my mom was looking for her great-grandmother's painting?" Kat said, understanding her a little better. "The one thing she couldn't steal." Abraham smiled. "I would not worry yourself about the last painting, Katerina. These things have a way of finding their way home." "And the angel?" Kat asked. "Oh, I think our friend Mr. Romani will see to her to return himself." They stopped at the end of the block, and Kat watched while he hailed a cab. "A wise woman once told me that someone like you could be of great use to someone like me. Would you agree?" but something in his expression told Cat that he already had his answer. He stepped toward the waiting cab. "Goodbye, Katerina." And there was a new twinkle in his eye as he crawled inside and started to close the door. "I feel quite sure we'll meet again." Cat would have liked to believe that she'd known which twists were coming, that she'd seen all of Romani's pieces and predicted where he might make his next play. But as she walked back toward the brownstone, she knew that wasn't true. She was not a master thief. She wasn't as good as Romani or Uncle Eddie. She would never be her father or her mother, but she wasn't the girl who had fled to or from the Colgan school either. As she stepped inside, she noticed that for the first time she could remember, her uncle's brownstone didn't feel too warm. The kitchen, she thought, was just right. Uncle Eddie stood by his stove, stirring a stew and waiting for his bread to rise. Her father sat with Simon, looking at the Henley plans, swearing, of course, that his interest was purely academic and that the museum would have completely overhauled their security by now, so there was no risk in sharing what they'd learned. Only Hale looked up as Cat came in. He motioned to one of the mismatched chairs beside him, and she took her place at the table without a second thought. Outside, the snow was still falling. In the other room, Uncle Vinny was singing an old Russian song to which Cat had never learned the words. "What about you, Uncle Eddie?" Gabrielle asked from the end of the table. "Who do you think Romani really is?" And Cat remembered Uncle Eddie's words. "He is no one. He is everyone." And still she held her breath as her uncle slowly turned. "I think there are two people in this world who have ever successfully planned a job at the Henley, Gabrielle." Cat felt the room grow quiet. Her uncle's gaze settled upon only her. "Vasily Romani, whoever he is the other one." Hale reached beneath the table, his warm hand grabbing hold of hers, and just as she leaned closer, relaxing against him, the back door flew open, and the Bagshaws burst in, ushering the cold air along with them. "It's freezing out there!" Hamish walked toward the stove and took a bowl from Uncle Eddie without asking, proving with that single gesture that Angus and Hamish had been officially forgiven for their nun incident and brought back into the fold with open arms. Conquering heroes. The boys who had blown up the Henley. "What's that?" Hale asked, and for the first time, Cat noticed the small parcel wrapped in plain brown paper that Angus carried under his arm. "Don't know," the older Bagshaw said. "Found it outside. Note says it's for Cat." Her first thought was Mr. Stein. Her second, however brief, was of Nick, but as Cat took the package, pulled back the paper, and stared down at the small canvas in her hands, she knew both guesses were wrong. A girl. She saw a girl with straight dark hair and a heart-shaped face and a petite frame and a devout posture as she kneeled, praying to St. Nicholas, the patron of thieves. From the other room, Uncle Vinny's singing grew louder. Uncle Eddie returned to his cooking, and Simon and her dad studied their plans. It felt to Cat as if she and Hale and Gabrielle were very much alone as she heard her cousin ask, "Is that what I think it is?" Cat nodded, speechless, as a plain white card fell from the package and landed at last on Uncle Eddie's table. "Dearest Katerina, rest assured the angel is safe, and she is happy. The enclosed belongs to you. It is time that it, too, returned to its family. Welcome home, Vasily Romani." Cat glanced up and saw Hale's concerned face huddled close beside Gabrielle's. She smiled reassuringly at them both. For a moment, her mind drifted to Hale's confession, Cat's ticket back into Colgan, that lay at the bottom of her suitcase, unopened and unused. But when Cat's gaze fell back on the priceless canvas in her lap, she thought of the girl who prayed to the patron saint of thieves. Katerina Bishop was indeed certain that she was no Vasily Romani. And yet, she smiled. And yet, she knew she could be. Author's note. While the specific works of art mentioned here are fictional, many of the sad facts of this story are true. During the time before and during the Second World War, the Nazis systematically plundered family treasures across all of Europe. Historians, archivists, and survivors work tirelessly to this day to right those terrible wrongs. Acknowledgements. This is a book about family. My publishing family, Disney Hyperon, has given me my professional home, and I can't imagine the last year without the support and guidance of Jennifer Besser and the keen feedback of Emily Schultz. I'm honored to be part of the Nelson Literary Agency family, and I'm incredibly grateful to Kristen Nelson and Sarah Medjibo for all that they do. As with professional thieves, professional writers and readers are like a family of their own. So I must thank Jennifer Lynn Barnes, Sarah Milnowski, Maggie Marr, Rose Brock, and of course, B.O.B., for their keen eyes and kind words as Kat and her crew evolved from a wild idea into a full-blown heist society. And most of all, writing about Kat's big, loving, and sometimes crazy family has made me realize how lucky I am to have one of my own.